In May 2023, climber Ravichandran Tharamalingam was stranded in Mount Everest's notorious death zone, barely clinging to life. A Sherpa named Gelje found him in dire condition. He strapped him to his back and carried him down over 2,000 feet to safety, an almost impossible feat. But what should have been a crazy rescue story with a happy ending turned into a big controversy after Ravi thanked his sponsors instead of the Sherpas who saved him from death's door. In this video, we'll try to find out what really happened in this dramatic rescue and why he overlooked his saviors. Hailing from Malaysia, Ravichandran Tharamalingam, or Ravi, always had a love for mountains, but Everest was his ultimate dream. In 2006, at age 41, he finally made it to the top. He reached the summit of Mount Everest, standing at 29,032 feet, where the air is thin and every breath is a challenge. It was a moment of triumph, but it didn't stop there for Ravi. He wanted more. In 2007, he returned for a second attempt, but this time it came at a heavy cost. Let's rewind a bit and dive into his 2006 expedition. For many climbers, Everest represents the ultimate goal. The journey begins at base camp, which is about 17,500 feet up. Imagine setting up camp on a cold, rocky plain, surrounded by towering icy peaks. The air is already thinner here, and it's just the start. Ravi's first climb was with a team that included Sherpa guides, who are experts in navigating these icy slopes. The Sherpas played a big role, guiding the team up the dangerous sections, like the Khumbu Icefall. This part of the mountain is filled with huge blocks of ice that can shift and crack at any moment. It's risky, but Ravi made it through. The team then pushed to Camp 2, set up at 21,000 feet. Ravi was acclimatizing well, meaning his body was getting used to the altitude. He was feeling strong, so the team moved on to Camp 3, which is on the steep Lhotse face. It's a giant ice wall that climbers have to ascend using ropes. After reaching Camp 4 at 26,000 feet, Ravi was now in the death zone, where oxygen levels dropped sharply. At this point, many climbers use supplemental oxygen to help them breathe, but Ravi pushed through, relying on his strength. He reached the summit that year and achieved his goal. It was a proud moment, but it also made him want to return and do it again. In 2007, Ravi went back, but this time, things took a bad turn. As Ravi climbed higher, he noticed a tingling in his fingers. His gloves had torn, but he didn't realize it until it was too late. He ignored the pain, thinking it would go away once the sun rose. He reached the summit again, but the damage was done. By the time he descended to lower altitudes, frostbite had set in. 8 of his fingers had to be amputated. Losing his fingers was heartbreaking, but it didn't break Ravi's spirit. Everest was still unfinished business for him. 15 years had passed since Ravi's last Everest climb, but the mountains still called to him. It was now May 2023. And Ravi, at 57 years old, was determined to complete what he called Everest 3.0. This was not just another summit attempt, it was personal. After losing 8 fingers to frostbite in 2007, Ravi felt that his past failures were unfinished business. This time, he wanted to reach the top without using supplemental oxygen. It was a bold and risky decision. At Everest's highest points, above 26,000 feet in the death zone, the lack of oxygen can make every breath a struggle. Ravi had trained hard for this third attempt. He focused on both physical strength and mental resilience, preparing for the extreme conditions he would face. His hands, even with the missing fingers, had toughened over the years. Ravi was confident that he could handle the climb. He wasn't alone. Joining him were 2 clients he was guiding, N. Elanghoven, a 64-year-old climber attempting his first Everest summit, and another climber from Malaysia. They were accompanied by a team of Sherpas, including Gelje Sherpa, a skilled guide known for his courage and experience. As always, the journey started from base camp. The air was already thinner here, and the temperature was cold, but Ravi felt strong. He remembered his past climbs vividly, especially the treacherous Khumbu Icefall, one of the most dangerous sections of the route. Ravi had lost his fingers in this area during his 2007 attempt. As he stepped into the icefall, memories of that disaster flooded back. But this time, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He was determined not to let the past haunt him. The team moved steadily through the Khumbu Icefall. The Sherpas led the way, using ladders to cross over the crevasses and fixing ropes for safety. Ravi kept up with the pace, using his shortened fingers to grip the ropes tightly. The icefall was as unpredictable as ever, with massive ice towers towering overhead. But the team reached Camp 1 safely, located at around 19,500 feet. Ravi's spirits were high as they prepared to move on. The next section was the Western Coombe, a wide, flat valley that sits like a bowl between Everest and Lhotse. The sun was intense here, and the heat bounced off the snow, making it feel surprisingly warm. Ravi wore sunglasses to protect his eyes from the blinding glare. As the team approached Camp 2, set at 21,000 feet, the effects of the altitude were starting to show. Breathing became harder, and each step required more effort. But Ravi's pace was steady. He was focused on the summit. The team reached Camp 2, where they rested briefly before tackling the Lhotse face. This is a steep, icy wall that climbers must scale using ropes. It's a challenging part of the climb, requiring strength and balance. Ravi's hands, though missing fingers, were still strong enough to pull himself up the ropes. As they climbed, the altitude made breathing more difficult. Ravi felt the pressure in his chest, but he pushed through, determined to reach Camp 3, set at 23,000 feet. At Camp 3, the team set up their tents on small ledges carved into the ice. The temperature dropped sharply as the sun went down, and the cold seeped into Ravi's bones. His severed fingers were aching, but he wrapped them carefully to keep them warm. He knew that frostbite was a real danger, especially at these heights. The team rested here to acclimatize, but Ravi was already feeling the effects of the thin air. The next goal was Camp 4, at 26,000 feet, located in the death zone. Ravi's breathing became labored as they made their way up the Lhotse face. Every step felt heavier, and dizziness set in. This is where oxygen levels drop drastically, making it difficult for the body to function properly. Ravi's Sherpas urged him to use supplemental oxygen, but he refused. He wanted to stick to his original plan. At Camp 4, the team paused for a few hours of rest. Ravi was exhausted, but his goal was within reach. The summit attempt was set to begin in the early hours before dawn. The plan was to reach the summit and return before the weather worsened. The temperature was freezing, and the wind was biting. Ravi layered up in warm clothing, put on his headlamp, and prepared for the final push. As they climbed higher, the altitude took its toll. Ravi felt lightheaded, and his steps were slower. The lack of oxygen was affecting his judgment, but he kept pushing. His legs felt weak, and his breathing was shallow. As he approached the Hillary Step, a steep rock face near the summit, he stumbled. His vision blurred, and he fell to his knees, gasping for air. Ravi was on the edge of consciousness. Gelje Sherpa, who was guiding another climber nearby, noticed Ravi's struggle. He quickly assessed the situation and made a tough decision. He convinced his client to turn back so he could help Ravi. Gelje moved toward Ravi, seeing that he was in serious trouble. Ravi was barely able to stand and was clinging to the rope. Gelje knew he had to act quickly to save him. Gelje secured Ravi with ropes and tried to help him regain his balance. But Ravi's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He was unable to walk on his own, and his breathing was dangerously slow. Gelje realized that he would have to carry Ravi down. This was no easy task. At over 26,000 feet, carrying a climber is extremely challenging, especially with so little oxygen. Gelje lifted Ravi onto his back, using ropes to secure him in place. The descent began slowly. The path was icy and narrow, with steep drops on either side. Gelje's legs trembled under the weight, but he pressed on, taking one step at a time. The cold wind made it hard to see, and every breath felt like a battle. Ravi was barely conscious, his head slumped forward. As they descended, two other Sherpas joined the rescue. They helped support Ravi and provided him with supplemental oxygen. This helped stabilize his breathing, but Ravi was still weak. The team continued the descent, making their way past the steep sections and down towards safer ground. After what felt like hours, they reached a lower altitude where Ravi's condition began to improve. The additional oxygen helped him regain some strength, but he was still far from safe. The Sherpas continued to guide him down to Camp 2, where he could be flown to Kathmandu for medical treatment. Ravi survived the ordeal, thanks to Gelje's quick thinking and bravery. It seemed like the end of the story, but for Ravi and the Sherpas who had risked their lives to save him, the real drama was just beginning. After being airlifted from Camp 3 to a hospital in Kathmandu, Ravi recovered enough to share his story. Soon he was back in Malaysia, appearing on TV channels and posting on social media about his third Everest summit. His posts highlighted his expedition partners, 14 Peaks Expedition Co. and Global Rescue Inc., the firms that managed the climb and provided logistical support. Ravi credited them for his survival, emphasizing how important their role had been. But there was one glaring omission. Ravi didn't mention Gelja Sherpa or the other Sherpas who had literally carried him down from the death zone. This omission did not go unnoticed. Members of the mountaineering community, many of whom had been closely following the rescue, were surprised and disappointed by Ravi's statements. Social media was flooded with comments questioning why Ravi had failed to acknowledge the Sherpas who had saved him. Some posts called Ravi ungrateful, while others demanded that he give proper credit to the team that had risked their lives to save his. As the pressure mounted, Ravi found himself at the center of a storm of criticism. The controversy reached a peak when Gelja himself posted about the rescue on Instagram. In a heartfelt message, Gelja described the moment he found Ravi in distress on the mountain. He explained how he had convinced his client to turn back from the summit attempt so he could focus on saving Ravi. "I carried him myself all the way down," Gelja wrote, adding, "He would have died up there alone without help." The post gained widespread attention, with many praising Gelja's courage and selflessness. In response to the mounting backlash, Ravi finally addressed the issue in a new post. He thanked all the Sherpas involved in the rescue, including Gelja, and acknowledged that their efforts had saved his life. However, by this time, the damage had been done. Many felt that Ravi's response was too little too late and that he had only spoken up because of public pressure. The mountaineering community was divided. Some supported Ravi, arguing that he might have been overwhelmed by the experience and the media attention. Others felt his initial response had been a deliberate choice to focus on sponsors and partners rather than the individuals who had physically carried him to safety. Adding to the controversy was a peculiar detail. Ravi had blocked Gelja Sherpa on Instagram shortly after the rescue. This move stunned many, as it seemed to suggest that Ravi was trying to distance himself from the Sherpas. When asked about this in interviews, Ravi offered no clear explanation. Speculation swirled. Was it a personal grudge? Was it an attempt to control the narrative of his rescue story? The blocking incident added fuel to the fire, making Ravi appear even more ungrateful in the eyes of many. As criticism continued to pour in, Ravi unblocked Gelja and shared more detailed acknowledgments of the Sherpas who had helped him. In a lengthy Instagram post, Ravi wrote, "Sherpas are the backbone of Everest expeditions. They never leave you behind, even when it means risking their own lives." He also clarified that he had arranged bonus payments for the Sherpas involved in his rescue and covered the cost of the oxygen used during the operation. But the public's response remained mixed. While some were glad to see Ravi finally giving proper credit, others were still skeptical of his intentions, believing he was only acting to save face. Meanwhile, Gelja remained humble despite the chaos. In his social media posts, he thanked his supporters and said he was simply doing his duty. "Saving one life is more important than reaching the summit," he wrote, reflecting the Sherpa ethos of putting the safety of others above personal goals. In interviews, Gelja mentioned that the rescue had been the hardest of his career. He didn't have nothing, no energy, no oxygen, nothing, he said, describing Ravi's condition when he found him. It was a brutal 6-hour descent, and Gelja admitted that carrying Ravi on his back for such a long distance had pushed him to his limits. The controversy surrounding Ravi's rescue also brought attention to a larger issue, the often overlooked role of Sherpas in high-altitude climbing. Sherpas have long been the unsung heroes of Everest, guiding climbers, carrying heavy loads, and performing dangerous rescues. Yet they rarely receive the recognition or compensation they deserve. For many, the incident highlighted how Sherpas are sometimes treated as mere support staff, rather than as the skilled climbers they are. This incident became a symbol of the broader inequalities faced by Sherpas, who often work under harsh conditions for relatively low pay, while foreign climbers receive most of the glory. Amid all the backlash, some supported Ravi. Some pointed out that he had already endured significant hardships, having lost 8 fingers to frostbite in 2007. They argued that surviving such a traumatic rescue might have clouded his judgment in the immediate aftermath. Others believed that the media was unfairly targeting Ravi, portraying him as the villain in a story where he was also a victim. Ravi himself tried to focus on the positive side, stating that he had learned valuable lessons from the experience and was grateful to be alive. Despite the controversy, both Ravi and Gelja continued to pursue their passion for mountaineering. Robbie expressed his desire to return to Everest for a fourth attempt. This time, he promised to climb with a greater sense of awareness and appreciation for his team. Gelja, meanwhile, remained dedicated to his work as a guide, saying he hoped to inspire others to respect the mountain and the people who make summits possible. So, in the end, the simple takeaway from this story is clear. Be thankful when someone saves you from death's door. No matter the heights you aim to conquer, acknowledging those who bring you back from the brink is the least one can do. Gratitude, after all, should come as naturally as the will to survive.